So, welcome to another episode of the Data Squad podcast. With me today, we have Fiona Gordon. She is the Global Director of BI Strategy at GLL. So, welcome, Fiona.
Thanks, Christian. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being here. And the topic of the day is data fluency in the real world. And when I talked to Fiona about this concept before, we actually renamed it because the topic was data literacy. And she was like, no, I have something better here, a better concept. And that's called data fluency. So we are going to start, first of all, understanding more about your background and what are the type of work that you've done in the past and where your career is going as well. So can you tell us a little more about, of course, the pandemic is a big topic. So how are you doing and how is your company doing with the pandemic situation?
Sure. I think it's top of mind for everyone at the moment. Here in Australia, we've been relatively lucky in comparison with a lot of the rest of the world.
That's true.
And although JLL is a global company, so we're a property company, we're based in 80 countries around the world. So there's varying degrees of impact that's going on. Most of us have been working from home at some point. My role, I actually get to work from home most of the time, unless I'm traveling around the world doing BI things. And so right now the travel's on hold, so the working from home is pretty much business as usual.
Yeah.
And as an organisation, I would say that we're seeing clients who are impacted more heavily, for instance, in the airline industries.
Yes.
But we have clients who have supply chain responsibilities, and of course they are very, very busy, keeping everyone fed with the latest technology, different things along those kind of lines. So we've really seen a multi-speed impact across our clients.
And have you seen anything different at the company as well, the way that you operate, for example, you conduct your projects?
Sure, absolutely. So more often than not, people would be working in offices around the world, and as we've started to have to work from home, we've had to rely a lot more heavily on our social channels. And so we've actually done a lot of work in terms of really building up the social channels so that they actually work for us. So that comes down to lots of little details. So being a global organization, we have teams all across the world, and we want to make sure that the teams in the countries are getting the right messaging. So we have certain channels, for instance, that are set up on Microsoft Teams for those specific regions or countries. And then they have notifications that are relevant to those specific people. We'll even go into details about how people should post up information to make it easy for us to search on an ongoing basis. Because social channels can be a little bit like Twitter, where the feed's coming down.
Yeah.
And so if you can't appropriately tag things or name them in titles, it makes it much more tricky to actually search for that topic later on. And as you can imagine, as we're starting to collaborate more and more online, that means that the volume and frequency of these posts is actually increasing, and you can sometimes get a little bit lost. But we've taken a lot of time to try and get it right, and I wouldn't say that we've got it absolutely right. But it's that continual focus and improvement and listening to our people in terms of what's working and what's not working so well.
And I think that's what pretty much every company is going through right now, right? How to activate that communication and that flow. And it's hard because this way, you and I, we're kind of used to this format because we work from home, but there are so many people that have never done it before. They don't even have a home office. So how do you even start changing the culture is a very big challenge. So
absolutely. And I would just one last point on that.
No, that's good.
I find the one thing that I really miss is the face-to-face interaction. So whilst I might be working remotely a lot of the time and working from home, when I do need to be collaborating with people, my preference is always face-to-face. We do some things like design thinking, which are much better off being face-to-face, so I can draw and show you what I'm doing. And that kind of speed that you get with the face-to-face interactions is really impacted. So we do find that things tend to slow down in terms of our ability to execute on some of those more collaborative projects.
That's interesting. Yes. So there's something that will never be easily replaced with technology,
exactly.
I guess. So let me take one step back, Fiona. And you are well known in Australia. You are a data evangelist. You've been in events. You work with different vendors in the industry. So can you tell us more about your background experience and your story? Basically, how did you come up with, being in the data space, and what was the journey that you took to be where you are today?
Sure. Actually, it's quite the story. So I left university a little early due to some family reasons, and ended up in some temp jobs along the way. And I eventually ended up in a temp job where I had to build 2 databases. And I told the guy in the interview, I was like, oh, I think you're interviewing the wrong person. And he said to me, why do you say that? And I said, well, I've never used Access. It was at the time. I've never used Access. He said, oh, you've got really great Excel skills, you'll be fine. And so turns out I picked it up pretty quickly and managed to deliver the contract in half the time that they had, which was only 2 months. So I managed to deliver it in 1 month, and I said to him, I'm done. Is there anything else that you need me to do? And he said, oh, well, do you want to be an analyst for me? I said, oh, sure, okay. And so he brought me into his team where I was analysing underground tank data for Mobil in New Zealand to make sure that we weren't leaking any product into the environment, because in New Zealand we've got a high water table, and old steel tanks mean that over time they degrade, and so there's sometimes things that can happen in terms of rust, and then there may be problems with the tank. So I got into it like that and really, really loved analysing the data. It was a bespoke program. I could easily read the trends and understand what was going on, and I'd send guys out to site to test things for us and to see whether or not that could be the cause of the issue. And most of the time it was nothing serious whatsoever. On the occasional time we may find that we needed to do some remediation work. So that was pretty interesting, but it was all on a bespoke program. And I started to think about, well, what's next for me? And I actually met up with a company that was doing a lot of predictive analytics, and they were using a platform called SAS. And whilst they didn't have a job for me at the time, they highly recommended that I learn SAS. And so I started applying for lots and lots of jobs, and was really lucky to get picked up by quite a large organisation in New Zealand, Telecom, which is like Telstra over here in Australia. And so Telecom taught me how to code. They then transferred me across into their Australian arm, AAPT. And the rest is kind of history. So my first job all the way back when was actually in data visualization. So I was reading trends and understanding what was happening. Throughout my career, I've done lots of different data roles. It could be campaign analysts, where you're pulling marketing lists, insights analysts, where you're really looking at what's happening in the data, more data visualization. And then slowly over time, what I found was I didn't really feel that the leadership understood data well enough. And they would often do a number of different things, but they weren't really investing in the right space. And I felt that I would like to give it a crack. And that would be something that I thought that, maybe I could help them create better environments for the analysts. I wasn't really thinking too much of the people leadership, to be honest. It was more around how do I make sure that we get the best kind of space. Because like many companies, the types of roles that I went into meant that I wasn't just a manager, I actually had to be hands-on with the data as well. And so I went through a number of different roles where I was both the manager and doing some of the strategy. And eventually I got the responsibility of a really large project to roll out Tableau at one of Australia's telcos here. And so we rolled out this big environment, and we did a really, really great job at it. And my passion once again for data visualization was sparked, because I really believe that people can understand data better from a picture.
That's very interesting. It's a great career. And I think, as we were discussing the other day, you are right now at this point in your career where you're finally doing what you like. So can you tell us a little more about your current role and the tasks that you do, the responsibilities, and also maybe if you can share some of the projects that you are working on today? That would be awesome.
Okay. So I really love my role. Like you say, I feel like I've finally got the role of my dreams in terms of what I focus on. And what is it? Well, so I'm the Global Director of BI Strategy. I focus on BI strategy for about half of our business at JLL. And what does strategy mean? I mean, sometimes it can get a bit of a bad rap, but really what I look at is projects and strategy for the next 3 years in terms of what we're doing, where we need to head, putting together programs to develop the capabilities of people, building up the Centre of Enablement to once again enable all of our great analysts across the business to come in and get centralised support in terms of how they should actually put visualizations together as well. I look at new tools, so I can also do proof of concepts, for instance, to really understand, you know, are the tooling that we're currently using, are they right for us? Do we need to add more tools? Do we need to contract? You know, where do we need to head? And how quickly do we need to do that as well? And how should we implement it? So it really comes down to people. How do we help our people become better analysts? How do we help our stakeholders understand our data? So it's not just about our own analysts, but it's also about our stakeholders as well. The process, so processes around how do our stakeholders engage with us? So what does that front door process look like? How does work get approved? How do we manage things in an agile fashion? How do we build up repeatable processes for our teams to actually use along the way? It can also be processes like design thinking. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that we do design thinking. I built a program, did a lot of research behind it on, you know, when we're going out for a big project, I'm not talking about, you know, some small delivery that we're doing, but if we're doing some significant investment, then we actually sit down with the business users and do design thinking. So we map out what are the problem statements. You know, what are the problems people are trying to solve? What does this actually look like? And we start to sketch. And this sketch isn't necessarily about what the data visualization is going to look like at the end. It's about, you know, I've got to get information from here and here. And what does that conceptually look like in order for me to help solve you? And then once you embed using that data in there, what does that look like too? So we really get that full picture, and we can think about how do we need to build the visual product in order to deliver to that vision and solve that problem. And then finally, the technology. So I sort of touched on that before, whereas we look at, you know, what tools we're actually using, how do we use them better? How do we build fluency programs, gamification programs to really embed the technology within our teams, but also make sure that we're using the right technology as well.
That's very interesting. So in the design thinking, I'm just getting started with that, by the way. I'm studying that course as part of my MBA. And we are learning about the double diamond, which is like a framework, a model that you go and, you know, analyze and discover and everything. But then there's a lot of feedback about, you know, companies not using it much because they think it's a waste of time and prototyping. We should just go straight to the solution. Do you see the value? I don't want to take you too much out of the topic that we're discussing today, but just I want to know more about your opinion on how effective it is.
And so I recognize that it actually does take a lot of time, which is why we focus on our larger projects. The reason why it's so important, in particular on these large projects, is stakeholders typically have been waiting around for a while to get to the front of the queue, in particular with these big projects. And so they've got, in their mind, they've got an avalanche of metrics that they always vomit at you. There's all the different things that I need. But an analyst doesn't understand the business context behind why that's truly important. And what design thinking gives us an opportunity to do is actually ground it in business context. And, you know, why is it a problem? You know, what's actually happening? What are the, you know, help us empathize with you about the frustrations that are going on, or the things that the challenges that you're facing, so that we can think about what data we have available to you and creatively come up with some solutions for you that potentially solve it. And because we're sketching, it's a really fast way for us to say, think about that. You know, do you need to get an alert on your watch when something's going wrong? Or, you know, is it something else that would work better for you? How should we be enabling all of the people? You know, what about, does there need to be some kind of closed loop process? So we know that dashboards are a one-way ticket, you know, that you look at the data and then you go and do something. How do I know that you've gone and done something about it though? So is there a way for us to push data back through in that same place? You can go and update it and you can see that you've driven some activity and making sure that you're moving the dial, you know, along the way. So For me, I think design thinking is critical, in particular with very large projects. And when I say large projects, anything that you're looking to do that's going to take you sort of 2 months plus in terms of a delivery life cycle. Make sure that you understand those business problems that you're solving, so you're not getting an avalanche of metrics. Or if you are getting an avalanche of metrics, you know exactly why they are important, so that you can be communicating them in a way that actually makes sense. And then hopefully the business will see a better product at the end of the day, because we'll hold it back to those original problem statements. Are we truly solving those problems, or have we just once again got the hundreds of metrics?
Yes, I think that's important part at the end, right? So what actionable thing you can do with this information that you have. But what I really like about your comment is how you are trying to take that feedback back to the loop, right? Okay, we are delivering all these metrics or these dashboards or whatever. Then you, Mr. User, if you are taking action, I need to know that so I can improve my own process as well. I think that's what's missing in most of these BI solutions and data solutions. They are not, feeding that information back to the loops to improve upon the process. That's a very good takeaway, I think. So let's move to the next part of the conversation, which is, why data literacy, or in this case, why data fluency, right? So the why behind it, why should we think about it? Why companies should even care about this? So the first question that I have for you is, well, I see that you are an ambassador or an evangelist of this topic. Why did you decide to do that? What drives you to talk about this and to evangelize people about this concept?
Sure. Peer pressure.
Okay.
It really did come down to peer pressure. So I was really lucky as I was starting out my Tableau journey, and we were looking to do this big project. And Tableau as an organization actually encouraged the leaders in my organization to sponsor me to go across to Seattle for a conference there. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the smaller US conferences that I've been to for Tableau, with 6,000 people, and I was absolutely overwhelmed by it. But over time, I started to meet some people over there who encouraged me to step up and share my story. And in particular, because there wasn't great representation down here in Australia, or even in APAC, more broadly, there were a lot of people that were in the UK and the US who were really great and really strong in the Tableau community, and they were kind of the idols, or the people that I leant on to help me to understand how to navigate through some of these bigger projects. And with their encouragement, I stepped up and I gained some confidence through that process as well. So, I was petrified of sharing my story, and I got to do it twice in 2016, once at the sales kickoff for Tableau, and then at the Tableau conference as well. And as I started to go through the public speaking, and I realized at the beginning of each talk, my voice would be really shaky, and I would be like a bundle of nerves, literally shaking. I had somebody actually reach out and tell me this. I said to them, I just don't know how to get over these nerves. And he said to me, it's really, really simple. The nerves sound worse in your head than they do to people that are out on the floor. The people on the floor will notice it slightly, but it's worse in your head. So what you should do is get someone to video you and watch it after and notice. And you know what? Tell you the truth, I never got anyone to video me for that reason. But just him telling me that made me relax and realize it's just worse in my head. And so the nerves over time became much, much more manageable. And they're still there sometimes, but I just tell myself that the reason for that is a bit of excitement. I'm excited about getting out there, seeing people. I have overcome some things along the way. So at one of the conferences I was interviewed during IronViz, and so there's 18,000 people there, and to get interviewed during IronViz, and you're up on the big screen, and these screens are huge. Yeah, I don't know. And so you can just sort of see yourself. Do you know what? I just thought, well, this is it. It can't get any more difficult than this. And now that I've sort of found my voice, I've really sort of switched it a little bit more about others. How do I help others on their journey to find their voice? So I lead or co-lead the Sydney Tableau user group, and up until a few weeks ago. I had never presented at the Sydney Tableau user group. I always used it as a platform to help others build their confidence as well. You know, it's a really important thing. You know, if I can influence, you know, 2 other people and then they go and influence 2 other people, it's you know, just like
a movement.
It gets out of control along the way. And, you know, I've also been really, really lucky. I think, you know, there's been so many people that have influenced me and that have helped me with my career, and they've been so generous in what they've been able to share. So if there's anything that I can do to do the same for others, so I'll give you an example, you know, of inspiration that we've used or I've used throughout my career is hiring people, how we go about hiring people. And I was fascinated by the Information Labs data school over in the UK, and the way that they could churn out great analysts, and even brought an analyst across from the UK at one point when I was at Optus, and what I saw was the recruitment process that they went through, how they hired good analysts. And Tom even sat down with me, Tom Brown, he owns the data school. He sat down with me and I asked him a few questions. I was like, so what do you do? And he was so generous with his time, and he told me about how they, you know, get people to go out, they build their visualizations, they have to use a bit of Ultrix, a bit of Tableau. And then he talked about the interview process. He talked about one interview question that he asks all the time, and I found it really interesting. He's spoken about it before, so I don't think it's a secret, but he asks people, you know, what's the one unique skill that you possess outside of work? Now, the reason why he does that is because, and I've stolen it, by the way, the reason why he does that, he wants to see how people actually perfect something, you know, on their own time. You know, what are they passionate about? And so he's hired people who are marathon runners, or, you know, been, look, I think it's you know, well awarded in Kung Fu, and different things along the way, where people have these specialized things that seem to have nothing to do with data or analytics, but really show a lot of passion and drive. And so that's something that I use along the way to help me find top talent.
Do you believe that anyone can be a good analyst, or that you need to come with some basics or some pillars in order to be one, or to become a great one?
There's one thing that I do look for in people's is their natural curiosity. Okay. I think it's important for analysts to be curious. I like them if they are going to be building visualizations to be a little bit creative as well. But the curiosity is one thing that is super important to me. So the reason being is that we want people to ask lots and lots of questions and try and really understand.
Everything.
Yeah, so and that they're not afraid to ask those questions as well. In actual fact, I think that there's some really strong analysts out there that have come from backgrounds that aren't so technical. You know, we find that people with a background in psychology, for instance, are really good analysts, and because they naturally start to think about the people aspect of things, but they've also got quite a strong background in statistics. So that's something that you may not think about is naturally a great fit, but all of a sudden, you know, as you start to see someone with that background come into an analytical role, they absolutely are. So given the way that we interview, we do technical tests. If someone doesn't have a background and they want to switch into it, but they've built a portfolio, you know, using community activities like Makeover Monday or Workout Wednesday, and that they can show me their technical expertise in a test, then I'm happy to develop them along the way. And we do spend a lot of time upskilling and helping people to become better analysts.
I think that's a good takeaway as well there. You know, you can bring your skills or your previous experience, but you will always keep learning, and it's important for companies to encourage that mindset of, you know, nobody's perfect, nobody knows everything. We are all trying to, you know, get along and get better and learn new stuff. So the encouragement is something that I don't see much, to be honest. Right. Sometimes companies like I'm paying for this and you have to know everything, and that's why I'm paying for. And there's little space for someone to make mistakes or to learn along the way, or to, you know, spend a few hours here and there to read a book or go to a seminar or go to a conference. Especially I think in Australia, they're still evolving that culture of, you know, making mistakes or learning along the way is okay. And we
Right.
don't have to be experts on everything. So it's good that at least in your company, you are promoting that culture of keep
Yeah.
learning.
I think internationally, you will see that there's a lot of papers being written, and there's a lot more that are coming out even now within the pandemic about the importance of continuous learning.
Yeah.
And one of the things as organizations, that organizations can do right now is invest in their people. They've got a little bit more. We all know that that there's a little bit more time, and if they can afford to keep their people on board, it's really important to help them build their skill set and capability. I mean, we are in the middle of a huge digital transformation that's only been sort of amplified in terms of what's happening in the pandemic. A lot more people are going social in terms of the way that they're interacting. We have to do a lot more Zoom meetings. We have to really adapt our behavior quite quickly in the way that we interact. And in addition to that, there is a little bit of extra time perhaps up our sleeves, and it's something that both at JLL and at my previous in my previous role at Commonwealth Bank that I really felt was important. Anyone who comes into my team, I want them to be exponentially better than they were when they first started. And the reason being is that I have a lot of experience. We've got great networks across the world who have excellent experience. I mean, at JLL, we've got a Zen Master, we've got I'm an Optrix Ace, we've got some Tableau ambassadors as well. So people who are really, really strong in the data community, and we're well connected. And so we can easily work with companies like Tableau and Optrix to start to roll out, capability programs. So I've built two programs in the past, the Ultrix Adventure and the Tableau Quest, which are both gamification programs. And they really take a look at how we can help people to advance their capabilities. And it doesn't matter if they're beginners, and it doesn't matter if they're experts to start with. We always uplift it just, more and more sort of along the way. And if we can do that, one, our people are happier because they're engaged. It's super important in particular for, Gen Z, Gen Y to find organizations who are willing to invest in their skill set and capability. And it's super important for them because they recognize it, but it's even more important for the people who are older to realize, hey, world's changing and I've got to get on board, and I've got to find something and a way to get on board. And it's not hard. It's just some time and effort to put into place. So if we can give you some time, if we can give you some coaching, if we can give you a process to follow, it will make it a lot easier for you, but also some fun along the way.
Yes,
hopefully.
that's a great takeaway. Yeah. So in this conversation about data fluency and or data literacy and why companies, well, nowadays everybody's talking about being data driven, and companies, they're all chasing the dream, right? I call that the dream of being data driven. Many companies don't even know what it is. They just want it. So in your view, why should companies consider being a data driven company? What are the benefits, and especially why they should consider as a priority to develop data fluency programs?
Well, I think there's a simple answer to it. If they don't invest in it, if they don't become data driven, they will be left behind. All of the Fortune 500 companies are investing in it. Now, there will be some startups that come along the way, and I can guarantee those startups will be using data to drive their organizations. They're a lot more flexible as well. They haven't got investment in legacy systems that they're trying to piecemeal together in terms of the data journey. It's a lot more flexible for them. So if a company decides that they don't want to be data driven, they don't want to have a data fluent set of employees, then they unfortunately will be left behind. Their competitors will come up and they will gobble them up, or they will pivot and they will find a different way of getting to the customers. And the other thing is that I think if you don't increase people's fluency along the way, that you will find that it doesn't matter how much you try to be data driven. So you're trying to come at it from one angle. if the people who are receiving that information don't understand how to consume it or comprehend it or use it, then you're going to find that you can't be data driven. So it's definitely not just a matter of having great analysts. It's about helping to upskill your stakeholders as well.
So I remember the other day when I asked you about data fluency, you gave me a very good description of what it was. So I would like you to repeat that here, especially for people who are just, getting started and they are listening or hearing a lot of data literacy. Why do you think data fluency is a better concept?
Right. Okay. So that's a great question. And so I'd like the listeners to reflect for a moment and think about the word literacy. And just kind of close your eyes and think about, what does it mean to be literate? And now consider the emotions that are tied to the word literate as well. Often there can be some negative connotations that are associated with literacy. So literacy to me means, whether or not you can comprehend or understand or read something. And fluency, on the other hand, is really an interesting concept. So if you consider how you learn a new language, for instance, let's say we're going to learn Italian, and it's about, how you first start speaking Italian and learning simple words and sort of piecing those words together. And it's a little bit jumbled and, it's a little bit gibberish and childish, but people can start to understand you along the way. And then maybe you start to read it a little bit as well, or start to get a little bit more refined in the way that you're speaking it. And then you get into the reading of it, and slowly but surely you become fluent in it. And maybe you're even dreaming in it by that point as well. So, it really becomes this piece where at the beginning you can communicate a little bit back and forth, but there's the scale about how effective you are with your communication when eventually you become fluent. So the fluency scale doesn't mean that everybody needs to be fluent in Italian, and not everyone needs to be completely fluent in data. In fact, not even analysts need to be completely fluent across the board. I mean, you can consider all of the different types of data analysis we have. You can have digital analysts who are really focusing on what's happening, which is quite a different space to what's happening in perhaps in a BI world, where they're looking at, how do I visualize some of the reporting from our transactional systems. Realistically, there's levels of fluency throughout every analyst's career, and where they hit, that's their level of competency along the way. And I feel that people are fine if people are learning a language and they're piecing it together, and maybe they're jumbling the language up, but they really see that somebody's trying along the way, and that they're less fluent than perhaps someone else who's a natural speaker in that area. So I hope that kind of clears it up. Fluency is really something that we're trying to say, that we're not expecting everyone to be at the same level of competency with data, but we want to help guide people to the level that they require for their roles.
I think that's a great takeaway. It's as long as you're moving forward, making little steps, you are becoming more fluent every day, right? That's great.
Absolutely.
So in that aspect, and you already touched base on this, and you mentioned a few benefits, but what are some clear benefits that you have measured, or you have received feedback from people? What are some clear benefits or key points when people become more fluent when using data?
Right. And so one of the considerations that I have when we're building out products for our stakeholders is their level of fluency and where they're at. And in actual fact, we have peer reviews that happen before any product gets delivered out into stakeholders. And one of the questions we ask them is, what's their level of competency with data? So that we understand the type of visualization that's being presented. Does that relate to who's actually going to be consuming it? Will they be able to understand it? So when we do that, we find that we're grounding things out in a form of simplicity, because we know that humans can process a picture 60,000 times faster than they can actually process text. But often you'll find people with a lower level of fluency will ask you to produce something in a table rather than producing it in a visualization. So it's up to us to help them on that journey and make sure that we are presenting the information in a way that they will be able to understand it, but they will also be able to comprehend it faster, and we will make sure that they pick up the insights that the data is showing as well. So the kind of benefits that we've seen with sort of having, maybe let me put the question back to you. Are you asking about the benefits that we've seen with data or data fluency?
With data fluency, when people become more fluent, what are some benefits that you see?
Sure. So when people become more fluent, they can action the data more easily and more effectively. And so we see them making better decisions around things. So that's when we become data-driven, and when we have become data-driven. Now, it's still a journey, okay? So I wouldn't say that JLL is completely there fluency at all. We still have a lot of work to put in place to really help guide our people along the way. But, you know, it's different programs of work that we do, such as visualization standards, where we standardize all of our guidelines, all of our deliveries under our standards, to make sure that people are aware of how our visualizations should work, where they should be clicking, what they should be doing, and how to navigate through it. They can then focus, instead of thinking, oh, now I've got a new visualization, how do I work this one? Go, oh, I understand filters are top right, they're in the little hamburger icon, and I know that when there's little triangles on the visualization, different triangle colors mean that different things about how you interact with this visualization. Slight visual cues that go through. And so we prime people to get used to the same thing, and so they become more productive in terms of they understand how to comprehend the data more easily. It's consistent, so they know where to go, what to do, but also there's some brand recognition behind it as well. So they trust the data. They know that the product's been built by a team who know what they're doing.
Great. So what would you say to companies that don't care about this, right? There must be companies out there that say, you know, this is rubbish. I've been doing business for the last 50 years and we don't need any program, any data fluency programs or any education. People just do their job. They have their Excels. We are fine. What would you tell them?
The cheeky part of me would be like wanting to say, is this your Kodak moment?
Kodak moment.
You know, when Kodak said that they didn't want to go into sort of the digital space, and because, you know, what they did was film. I'd get curious about it and sit down and try and ask them why, and really get to the bottom of it. You know, what's holding them back? You know, have they had some failed projects before that haven't really worked? I mean, BI, you know, and data and analytics has changed a lot over the last 20 years. And I'm sure it's going to change a lot more even in the next 5 years in comparison with that 20 years. You know, the rate of change that we will see with the types of analytics that we're getting through. I mean, you know, we've talked a little bit about search analytics, for instance, as something that's really starting to come through quite strongly and is quite easy to comprehend for less data savvy people or less data fluent people. And so we're now starting to look at how we can broaden that out, but do it in a safer space. So the question I would have is, you know, tell me why don't you care? What is it about it? And then quite frankly, if it was a company that I was looking to go and work at and there was that lack of care, then maybe that's something that I would leave behind. I can tell you, life is a lot easier when you find an organization that is committed to being data driven.
Yes. So do you remember a company where you were actually working there and they didn't have that mindset, or they were against developing this kind of programs?
So I don't think that there's been specific companies that have been against it. Like no one outwardly says, oh, I don't do data. Data. But there's been some organizations that may think, we've done one big data project, and so why do I need to keep investing in this space? There've also been organizations where there is only a very small investment pool that they're willing to put into it. And, you know, maybe, you know, in the second instance there where that small investment pool, it would have been, you know, sort of many, many years ago, and they changed and moved on. I would say for those companies who felt that it was a one-time investment and that I don't keep investing in this space, anything that we don't give attention to, like our plants, they die. Things die off. If we don't continually nourish and look at how we can improve things, a product that I've delivered a year ago, I can guarantee you today I've learned so much more that I can improve.
Of course.
Yeah. And so we need to make sure that we are making things better, because we know that when we deliver things, there's certain design decisions that we have to make. Sometimes it's to do with the limitations of a product, and sometimes it's to do with the limitations of our resource. Do we have the time or capacity or money or the right people to actually go and develop this as well? And sometimes those are things that we need to actually say, actually, MVP delivery or delivery round one is not going to include that.
Yes.
It's not going to reap us enough benefits in order for us to find that funding. But over time, we do need to continue to invest. So for the second company, or the first company where it was difficult to find that reinvestment, I went through it for a number of years, and then decided to branch out and find another challenge for myself.
Yeah, sometimes you have to know when to move on, right?
Absolutely, but the beauty of it is that I know that they're still using the products that were built.
Imagine. Okay. I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing. After all this year, they're still using the same thing. They are not evolving because it was so good that
it was pretty amazing. It reaped multi-million-dollar returns year on year. So it was a very, very successful program of work. So that may be why they continue to use it.
Yes, that's why. Let's go with that one. So let's move on to the next part of the conversation, which is all about how to get started. So the next questions are going to be more about you giving advice pretty much to people. If someone is listening and they are like, I'm just starting this journey, I'm just getting to know more about data literacy or data fluency. So the first question that I have for you is, for people just looking to implement a data fluency program, where should they start? What are some of the key steps they need to go and build in the next few weeks, let's say?
Right. So the first thing there's a couple of things to understand. I would say assessing the fluency of people. So understanding what it is and how have I gone about that in the past. I've just done a really simple survey with a couple of questions in it. So are you in a data delivery role where you create things with data? So what I'm trying to look for there is, are you technical? I'll give an example, sort of reports or predictive models. I have a follow-up question to that. What's your role title? Because some people think that they're in a data kind of technical role, but I would probably classify them as more business roles. I get the title in there just so I can do some data cleanup. And then I give them a 7-star model of different data levels. So the first one is, I know nothing about data, and I'm happy to say that no one's ever selected that in any of the surveys that I've done. But the next question is, I can use Excel and create basic calculations, like a sum or an average. And so I've had many people answer at that level, and slowly but surely I step it up, into some data visualization questions. Like I can read a data visualization that somebody else has created, but I don't create them myself, into the creation of content, and then into sort of predictive and prescriptive models along the way. But really taking them through that kind of gamut of the analytics maturity model, I would say, in terms of what they do. Once you have an understanding of the sort of numbers that you have within your organization, that's kind of your population, I suppose, that you're looking to address. And you can make kind of two decisions, because you've got two very different types of groups of people. You've got people who are technical analysts, and then you've got your consumers. And then some of the consumers, you may say, well, those roles are really not relevant. So if you've got someone, I don't know, like, so if you're talking about a bottle store, for instance, like everyone's been drinking a lot lately and lockdown. Maybe the person on the counter at the bottle store doesn't need to understand what's happening in the numbers, but the person who's doing all the, restocking, the person who's doing all of the planning for people to be on tills, everything else, they've got lots of data-driven type roles and activities that they can do, and they may be sort of primed for helping them in their fluency levels. So you've got these kind of two groups and understanding about where they're sitting, and then you sort of step back and you look at the types of things that you're trying to achieve from a business perspective. Okay. So what is your strategy from a business perspective? Where are the things that you need to address? What's strategically important to your organization? And it may be, in the bottles, for example, maybe it is about people, and that they're, scheduling people on at the right time, and that they've got, enough people on store to be dealing with the number of people coming in, etc. So that could be of strategic importance, and they can start to drill into the types of things that they may need to look at, and then realize, okay, these people can't read a data visualization, but they can read, they can do some stuff in Excel. So they've got a basic understanding of data, but they don't have enough, right? So how am I going, we know the data visualizations help people to understand data better. So how do we get their skills to improve in the data visualization space? So you can look at, what is a simple program that may come through? How much is that going to cost me to actually build and implement? What does the change management look behind it, etc.? Build your business case and go from there. On the flip side, if you're looking at a more technical space, your technical people are going to need much, much bigger programs to increase their efficiency. And so, what does that look like? How much can you use that's out in community? How can you get them to practice a lot? We know that in fluency programs that people learn better by doing, not listening. So we need to make sure that we've got practical things that challenge them along the way, that are enough to embed the theory that we're trying to teach them. So that's what I would do. I would first of all survey people. Then I would look at programs that you're trying to create, and then build a business case and sell it out.
In the survey aspect, I remember a couple of years ago looking at this framework that Gartner put together, I think they call it the data maturity level. So basically, there are multiple levels of maturity. Do you use something like that for your organization, or you build your own kind of model, evaluation model?
No, we just so we simply built our own model to look at, what are the fluency levels and what are we looking for internally. So we do talk a little bit about SQL in there, of our questions. So it really looks at where people are at, what we're trying to achieve. We're actually trying to move away from SQL as much as possible and into the Ultrix space where we've got repeatable workflows, because it's much easier for people who are less SQL experienced to pick up Ultrix than it is for them to pick up SQL, because SQL is like learning an actual language, whereas Ultrix, I can click on a tool and understand what that tool means interactively in the same place as well. So we don't use Gartner's program. I'd be interested in learning more about it. Maybe you can put it into the podcast notes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I will invite them.
Thank you.
It's a good one. So in terms of the learnings, right? You have been developing these programs, and you talk a lot about gamification. What are some key learnings there? What works, what doesn't work? What would recommend people to implement? And why do you think that you say, this is not going to work? Don't waste your time on these kind of things.
Right.
Whatever.
So there's a couple of learnings. You're never going to get it right the first time, so don't try.
Just go with it.
Get something out there. It's something that you can and talk about it as this is a program that will help all of us understand how to better move along in this journey. And so it's quite a community-led thing. The other thing is your programs will never fit 100% of your audience either. There'll be some people that love it, and there'll be some people that are just like, whatever, it's just, this doesn't interest me. And that's fine too. It's something that we talk about when we're rolling the gamification programs out at JLL. So we have time that's booked out in calendars. I attend meetings around the world. We're doing our programs. So we jump online. They have an hour to go and build a challenge, do some learning along the way, and they can ask if they're getting stuck anywhere as well. And whilst we do ask that people come on during that hour, we don't force people to be, continuing to learn outside of that time. If they choose to, if they have time to do it, in their day-to-day jobs, absolutely. We do find some people even do it after work as well, especially in COVID. There's a lot of downtime people have got. And when they feel like, and you mentioned it before, when they feel like they're getting that sense of progress, that's really where the motivation kicks in, which is really, really important. We found, even up front, I'd done a lot of research about it. I was fortunate enough to see Dr. Jason Fox speak at a Tableau conference here in Australia, actually 2 of them, and he inspired me to put these gamification programs together. But he had this one word of warning, which is don't use extrinsic motivation and use intrinsic motivation. And the difference between the two is extrinsic motivation is the carrot. If you do this, if you do this.
Yeah.
Intrinsic motivation is really helping to trigger somebody's desire to actually do something, and that they know that there's not a reward, but they understand why that they should actually do it for themselves to improve. And when you tap into that desire for them to improve themselves, it's not like a flash in the pan, something that happens really quickly. Whereas when you give them, say, oh, I'll give you a $50 voucher if you get to this level on our program, people forget about that $50 voucher really, really quickly. Don't forget about is when their manager is thanking them personally in their one-on-one, or publicly celebrating them, praising them, congratulating them for the work that they've done or the certification that they've achieved. That's the thing that actually drives people and keeps people going in terms of their progress and their motivation. So my strong recommendation is please, please, please do not use extrinsic motivation. Do not have any reward-based things. The biggest reward that the teams get from us is public celebration of their achievements and a sticker for the back of their laptop.
Awesome.
It's nothing, but once we're back in the office, hopefully there'll be some people that go, hey, you've managed to get to this level on the adventure. But it's really about their own motivation to go through things and to experience it. Now, the benefits for us in investing in our people is that, one, they are happier. So they actually really appreciate the time that we're investing in them. 2, that they're not afraid to jump on a new tool. They're not afraid to actually give it a crack. Whereas previously they may have gone to someone who they knew had previous experience in it and say, hey, can you help me do this or anything? Now they're actually trying it because we're teaching them how to try it. We've been teaching them in the challenges that they're doing. How do you search for the stuff? And they've also been exposed to a lot of different tools along the way that they can now think about, oh, maybe maybe I can solve it that way. And over time, they actually, start out with these projects that are, like in Ultrix, for instance, the workflows are just these mad tools everywhere on it. It's quite a mess, nothing's sort of structured. And then over time, they're like, oh, I could have been so much more elegant in my solution.
Yeah, of course.
Up to here as well. Highly recommend setting up the gamification programs. They're fun. We make sure that people have a good time along the way. And every single time that I see that someone's certified, honestly, it's the best feeling getting that notification come through that we're actually helping people progress their careers.
So that's a good start for the next section, which is some challenges or some pitfalls that you have seen and how to avoid them, and especially for people just getting started. So first of all, what are some common pitfalls? So for example, the gamification, don't try to put the carrot in front of people. That's a good one.
Right.
But also I'm curious to know, how do you convince or how you talk to your C-levels into these kind of programs, and maybe we're going to the weeds here on how you do it, on how you present a proposal that it makes sense from a business perspective. So your managers, your C-levels are okay with that, and let's put some money into this. Let's roll in it.
Right. I'm pretty lucky at JLL. because they hired me because they knew what I do with gamification programs. So they actually hired me for some of that was some of the reasons why they actually hired me. So it's been less time that I've had in investing in selling it and more time delivering it.
Doing it,
Which is great. At other organizations where, you know, things have been trickier to navigate with the senior leadership team, some of the things that I do is rely on a lot of external research. So the World Economic Forum has been talking for a long time about continuous learning and why it's important. There's some great research out there as well. I was also reading a paper yesterday about the future of work, and again, it talks a lot about continuous learning in there, and perhaps I can find it for you and you can
that
add
would be
it
amazing.
and see if we can load that up as well. The more that you can find some of this research that backs up what's going on, but then you can talk about, you know, we don't have the same opportunity right now to get our teams together. You know, if we're going to do an offsite, for instance, where we might spend some money on doing that, we don't have the ability for people to go into training. What about if we spend some time creating these programs with a low entry cost? So the Ultrix Adventure is zero cost to my business, zero cost. There's no training cost, there's nothing. The cost are the stickers. So stickers are about $50, and the postage around the world, okay, that's a little bit more, but you know, it's not, you know, it's not thousands of dollars, it's sub $1,000 in terms of the program itself. It's, you know, something that people are excited about. It's the strongest channel, the strongest community channel that we track in terms of our engagement of our teams. So the amount of people that are posting, liking, doing different things in that particular channel is really, really strong. And so you can position it with your leadership team around, this is a low cost to entry. The time that all we're asking for is time, realistically, of your people. You know, JLL are doing it, and they're doing it for just an hour a week. At Commonwealth Bank, I set aside 4 hours per week. I've deliberately done less hours for the Ultrix Adventure because we're going to be layering in other programs such as the Tableau Quest. We're rolling out visualization guidelines training at the moment, a bunch of other things that we want to help people actually achieve. And so these are things that we can do with very little barriers to entry, but can make people happy and actually show we care about them improving things. But on the flip side, you will get benefits out of it as well, like our activity increases. Yeah.
So following this trainer conversation, right? You went there, you evaluate the current status of your people and where they are in terms of fluency. Mm-hmm. You decided, or you presented a plan to your executive. They say, yep, go for it. So you say, you know, we have to educate all these people into becoming from 0 to 1, and these people from 1 to 2 level, whatever. But then you go there and start implementing, and people say, you know what, I don't care about this. I'm a business user. I'm an executive, I'm a manager. Why should I do this? I don't have time for this. How do you convince them or overcome that situation, that the kind of opposition to you rolling out your program and making it effective and, you know, I don't know, getting something out of it? How do you go about that challenge?
Yeah, you definitely need to strike a balance. So first of all, not everyone wants to be a data person, and even data people may not want to participate in your gamification programs as well. And that's okay. It's a balance between teaching people about what's important for their role, but actually finding a trigger point that actually may engage them more. So, for instance, when we're looking at people that aren't data people, so, you know, they're doing a different role. For us, it might be one of our facilities managers. Data's important enough in their role, but it's not the central thing about what they do. So programs that we are plan for is to help people in a more general sense improve their data fluency. And what we're looking to do is actually build these programs around not activities that are relevant to what they do in their day-to-day role, but what they do in their personal lives, because data is everywhere within our personal lives. You know, if you think about your electricity bill, for instance, at least here in Australia, when we get our electricity bill, there's a comparison. It's a chart. Sometimes there's a chart between you and your neighbours. Sometimes there's a chart between quarter on quarter about what's happening. If you really don't understand data visualizations, you're not going to be able to easily understand that. And there may be some insights in there that you're well above or well below what's actually happening. And you could read that if it was in text, but it's actually harder for you to comprehend. So there's more cognitive load for you to be comprehending. So we look to build programs that really involve people about, learning about themselves. What about your fitness? How do you understand, all of that data that's in your fitness watch along the way, and how can you improve your skill sets and what can you do? We want to build things that are relevant like that, so people understand different and understand indirectly different chart types that we are showing them, but we teach them about what they're doing in their day-to-day lives to actually get better. So those are things that we look to do is we try not to overwhelm people. We try things really super relevant so that they don't have to think about there's another learning program that I have to do that's compulsory to get through things. We want people to actually engage because they think that they're going to become better.
So basically just trying to sell the benefits of participating, right? And convincing people around that instead of making it compulsory.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have one more question for you here in this section. Is about, if someone is already preparing a plan and they need to go and find some budget. What are some key things that you will recommend them to add in this program or in this proposal to get funded?
Right. So I think when I've presented any strategies, strategy papers can be really hard, right? Because you've got a very small window with some very senior individuals, and those senior individuals get involved in many different things along the way. And so this is just one tiny blip on their day, and in terms of what's going on. But at the same time, sometimes these individuals also want to get pulled down into the detail. And so it's really important for them to be able to, sit at a helicopter view about what you're trying to achieve, but then be able to be drawn in as well. So some good structure behind that is having problem statements about what you're trying to achieve. So here's the problem. But then taking them through the journey, here's the insights about what you've found. So you could say, I don't know, picking a number out of there, 25% of our people are not, data fluid.
Yep.
Excuse me, and they can't read a data visualization. That means a quarter of people who are reading our reports will not know what to action from them. Right, and so they'll be making the wrong decisions. So that sets the scene for them. Okay, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what we're looking to do. We're going to create, a program that takes an hour to complete, and we want people to complete it over the period of a month. We're going to make it relevant to them and their personal lives, but we're going to uplift their capability and measure it along the way. And at the end, hopefully we'll see a decline in that number that can't read data visualization. And then this is how much it's going to cost, but this is the return that we think that we will receive. Okay. And then at the end, tied up with sort of an outcome objective. And so instead of the problem statement, here's the outcome that we expect to achieve, and here's the timelines with it. So those are the kind of points that I would touch on. So problem statement, insights, high level of what you're trying to do, and then the outcome statements, the timeline, and the costs.
Great. So that's all great, by the way. It's great insight. I was just thinking and visualizing it the way that you will present these proposals to make it attractive, right? And to make it a no-brainer, as people like to say. So then the last section of the conversation is about tips and recommendations, more in the professional, personal development side. So let's start thinking of people out there that's listening. They are resonating with your message, and they are in thinking maybe this is the way that I want to go. This is kind of the path that I would like to take my career. What would you recommend them? How do they get started as becoming something like you are doing today, like this data evangelist or professional?
Sure. So to start out with, I would build up a strong network, and I know that it can be really daunting. Many analysts are introverted and a little worried about working with other people. Sometimes even I get overwhelmed by social media. So don't think it's something that people like me can consistently cope with. Sometimes when I'm getting a lot of notifications and a lot of messages, I actually need to walk away and then
turn off.
That's just maybe a little bit of insight about me. But I recommend building out your strong network of people and who in particular are in roles that you would really like to work towards. And this might not be something that's your next role. It may be something that's a few roles ahead of you, but you want to find out about what they did in order to get there. Ask them how they got there, but also talk about yourself and your aspirations. So one thing I've learned is if you're really open about what you're looking for, at some point someone's going to come back and go, hey, are you interested in a role like this? Because they've got, we all have people that are asking for good people along the way. So if you've started to reach out and build that network, someone may have you in the back of their mind when the perfect role comes up as an entry-level point for you to start getting into the space. Ask these people what they recommend that you focus on in terms of changing. And then that way it can be specific to what you're doing and what you've done previously as well. I've also got a technique that I recommend to people when I do some coaching or mentoring along the way. And it's kind of leveraging the technique of journaling. Lots of people journal about what's going on, but this is a specific journal. It's doing it for 30 days. So a decent amount of time, making sure that at the end of each day, you're writing down what you liked about that day and what you didn't like. And that's all you need to do. And then at the end of the 30 days, you actually review what you've written down, because you've got a bunch of data there, and that data is actually going to start to highlight some of the things that are some common themes that are occurring in terms of what you're liking and what you're disliking. And then you can start to say, all right, well, these are the things that I'm really after. This is what I really want to be doing. Because you might think that strategy is cool, but then when you start to think about how long a strategy takes to put together and how long it actually takes to deliver it, you may say, well, I want something that's a bit faster than that. I want to get a bit response in terms of what's happening. And sometimes it can be slow and it can be hard slog because you really are breaking new ground with things. And maybe that's not for you. But this kind of background in terms of what you've been doing day to day is really helpful. I mean, as humans, we forget quickly about what we liked and what we didn't like. And this is just giving you something that you've got to reflect on. And you might be surprised as well. You might find out, hey, I'm a people person, but I thought I was an introvert. I really like helping people. Those kinds of things are really, really valuable in deciding what you want to do for your next
I think a lot of people will resonate with that message because especially now, I found out that COVID and the whole enclosure situation is pushing us to reflect more about who we are as individuals, who we are as professionals, and where do we want to take our careers really, and what really matters, and all these kind of questions that I'm guilty. It's popping up in my mind, like, what do I really want to do? And I am assuming most of the people out there is going through similar challenges. So that's a great advice about writing down what you like, what you don't like, and use the data to
Absolutely
about yourself to make decisions. Yeah. So and one more question: do you have any coaches or courses or conference or tools or books that you will recommend that has been helpful? You probably have a ton, right? We don't have time to touch on everything, but whatever is in top of your mind, and then you can say, this book really changed my professional career, or this coach, or this conference.
Okay. I'll try and keep it brief, because there's that I've done that I think have really, there's certain things that stand out to me that I think that have really shaped my career. One is my presentation coach, Michael Kelly. So he's based in Australia. He's helped me to distill key messages and also others. And he's also got some great techniques on giving feedback, which I've sort of wound into how we give feedback on visualizations, and many of the Tableau community have adopted along the way as well. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about that at great length anytime. Of course, when we can travel again, I actually I've invested in myself quite significantly in my own career, and I've sent myself to US conferences many times myself rather than organizations sending me. And so I've actually, put aside my own money, my own time. Sometimes I've managed to negotiate the time off from the company and they would pay for it, but I pay for all of my travel and accommodation costs, which means that I share rooms with people, everything that you can possibly do. Get yourself to the US. The conferences are the biggest there, the most to learn, and you've got the biggest network that you can connect with. So head over Tableau, Ultrix, definitely do that. At the moment, there's online webinars and there are online conferences as well, which are harder to network in. It's a little more awkward. I think we've found a really good way to do that quite yet, but we'll get there. But try and get involved as much as possible. There's a few books that resonate with me. So I mentioned Dr. Jason Fox as a presenter that I've seen at a conference before. He's got a book called How to Lead a Quest. Definitely check that out if you're interested in some gamification. Cole Knaflick's books on storytelling with data and practicing as well have been really good for me to think about how I conceptualize data programs. She's got a really good way of balancing out the kind of chalk and talk versus actually doing something and being practical as well. So that's, kind of the best books that I've got. And then finally, definitely get involved with the communities that you can. Now, I know a lot about the Power BI community or other data communities, but I certainly know that Tableau and Ultrix have really strong data communities. They've got great community events that are on, like Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, Sports Viz Sundays. Ultrix have got all of their weekly challenges. Those weekly challenges are where you learn how to use those 200 tools that sit within the environment. So it's a good way to get yourself up to speed. And the best thing is, if you don't know how to solve it, and you get stuck and you've tried to solve it, you can actually download the solution and reverse engineer it. So figure it out along the way. And you're still learning that way, making sure that you're putting these things into practice as well. So that's a bunch of stuff. That's a bunch of stuff that I'm doing. Yeah.
Do you know if these communities are still, coming together virtually, or they have a freeze now because of the situation?
Yeah, no, they're absolutely still going. All the communities are still going. Everyone's still doing things. There's been a number of online conferences as well. I've been presenting at the Data Community Fan Band Jam. We've had a number of different Tableau conferences online. The Makeover Monday crew is still going, as well as Workout Wednesdays. So, and I know that Ultrix is still up and running as well. So, and if anyone's actually lost their job, Ultrix have a really good program called Adapt, where people can free licensing. They can also get a bunch of training and support to actually help them in their career. So it's a way for you to say, actually, if I'm really interested in getting into data, maybe this is something that I can check out. And worst case scenario, you figure out that you don't like it.
Exactly.
Just figuring out that you don't like it. Best case scenario, you get certified, and then someone who's looking for someone with great Ultrix experience, you can say, well, I'm just learning, but I've managed to get certified, while I was retrenched, and blah, 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 blah. And, we look out for people that are passionate like that are really investing in themselves. So I highly recommend doing that.
Good stuff. So actually, Ultrix and Tableau, they offer, I think, free licenses for students. So if anyone out there is still a student or studying something at university, they can get access to these licenses pretty much for free for a year or so. So that's, what else do you need? Those two powerful tools will take you a long way. So yeah, Fiona, thank you very much for this session today and taking the time to speak with me. And hopefully the audience and the people listening, they will get a lot of good value out of this conversation. I'm going to make sure to add those links, those recommendations that you gave us today in the comments or whatever I'm going to publish this podcast. So any closing words that you want to share with us?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I feel a little bad. I feel like the conversation, maybe I didn't involve you in the conversation enough. I get really passionate about this and love to chat about it at great length. So I'm always happy to continue the conversation either with you or with anyone else. If they want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. So my profile's under Fiona Gordon on there, but I'm actually Fee Gordon, so it's linkedin.com/in/Fiona Gordon. or you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Vizchick, so VIZCHIC. My DMs are open. It's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Great. Yeah, I will make sure to share those contact details in the video details as well, so people can reach out to you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. And that's it. And we'll see you guys in another podcast session soon with hopefully a new speaker. By the way, if you know someone that it could be a good fit and a great guest for this, let me know.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Have a great day. Thank you.